Well, good afternoon. I hope you had a nice, wonderful lunch to take care of your food security. Welcome to this event on financing women for a fair future, alternatives to retool development and reform finance from a women's rights perspective. We are honored and privileged to host you today. Allow me to thank our co-sponsors and partners in this joint effort. I'm María Fernanda Espinosa, the Executive Director of GWL Voices. We are partnering with Club de Madrid, the Association of Caribbean States, and the Government of Spain. And very proud to be joining forces to address this very critical issue. And my job is to basically introduce our super moderator. This conversation will be moderated by Cristina Gallac. Cristina Gallac is a journalist, former United Nations high-level official. Cristina was Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs and Ibero-America and the Caribbean of the Spanish government. She served as High Commissioner for the 2030 Agenda for the Spanish government. She also served as the United Nations Under-Secretary General for Communications and Public Information. And prior to this responsibility, Cristina worked for the Council of the European Union as head of the Public Relations Unit in the Directorate General for Information and Communication. To make the story short, she's a powerhouse. She's, I say this proudly, she's member of the board of GWL Voices, and she will be leading our conversation. Cristina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, María Fernanda, but most of all, thank you very much to our panelists, fantastic panel, an after-lunch panel with lots of energy, and thanks very much to all of you for taking time in this competitive environment, because just around the corner there are many other panels which are also extremely interested. So we really thank you for coming here to listen to the voices of the global women. Global women that we are convinced that we have to shape a better future, and we will take as an immense milestone what happens these days here in Seville. So I am honored to moderate a conversation between Aminata Touré, former Prime Minister of Senegal, former Minister of Senegal, with more than 20 years experience at the UN in different positions, and extremely convinced leader of the power of women. We owe you having shepherded very important initiatives in your country, including being the personal representative of the President of Senegal in different very complicated situations. So, Aminata, thank you very much for joining us. María Fernanda Espinosa already introduced herself, but she is the pillar of global women leaders, and we all recall her extraordinary tenure as President of the General Assembly. And Minister for Ecuador, for Defense, National Defense and Foreign Affairs, and the first woman diplomat being ambassador at the UN, both in Geneva and New York. A little bit farther away, hello Noémie. Noémie is a diplomat as well, so this is a place of diplomats. And Noémie has a great experience as well in both the UN as national ambassador, a national diplomat, but also the UN official. And currently, she's the second woman to hold the position of the Secretary General of the Association of Caribbean States. So that's an important milestone, because representation for us is key. So now she is the Secretary General of the Association of Caribbean States. And a little bit farther away, my dear friend and colleague, Ana María Alonso, with 20 years of experience as a diplomat, the Spanish Foreign Service. She served in places like Afghanistan, where women are going through extraordinary difficulties, and with your experience, you bring light in the job you currently have, which is ambassador, special ambassador for feminist foreign policy. So we owe you lots of the extremely important things that have been said by the Spanish senior officials and politicians in this conference, Ana María. We sense in their words your inputs. Thank you very much. She is an extraordinary ambassador for feminist foreign policy. So, with these presentations, and thanking you all for being here once again, let me start the round of questions to all of you, and I will start with Aminata. Aminata, many discussions here in this Financing for Development conference focus on the underinvestment on public goods. Underinvestment of public goods. This has to resonate on us, because if we were able to invest more in public goods, things would be different. You have government experience, and you've been transforming in many parts of your society and in the UN. What would be a good an adequate financial framework that would prioritize public goods such as, for example, care work? You know, there are so many hours of care work that are not valued, that we don't even count them, that we look at figures like 10.8 billion could be generated if care work would be properly financed. What would be the impact if we were able to value care work and to invest more on it?
Well, thank you very much for organizing this discussion. The issue of care work is really to be contextualized. And it's also related to culture. I can tell you, if you come to Africa and say, well, listen, we have to give money to women because they're taking care of their family, you're going to be looked at as somebody crazy. So the way you're going to frame it is very, very, very important. Because you do have, if you look at the Maslow ladder, where you do have different types of needs, I'm not very sure it would come up in the priorities of women. But we know it's very important. So how are you going to factor it into a policy that makes sense, including for women? So you do have that. So it can be a very hot topic in some places and less of a hot topic in others, because you do have women who would like to, first of all, deal with survival issues, such as accessing health, accessing reproductive health, accessing education, accessing money to generate incomes. And, of course, since the society is designed in such a way that it's natural, only natural, for women to take care of their family, how the state is going to invest in those activities, so it's going to free women, from the burden of what they're doing. So we have to be very strategic when we talk about that, and have a very fine analysis of the priority. Otherwise, we miss the boat, because we are not the only one out there. We are swimming against the tide most of the time, and being presented as westernized women who suggest that we dump the kids in some daycares and etc. We don't want to do that. But before that, I would like to acknowledge, I think, the 2 or 3 men that I see here, and they merit a round of applause. Yes, because we really need to partner with progressive men. Because the issue, as I said, we are really climbing up the mountain, because for centuries and centuries, that's the job of women, to raise children, to take care of their families, etc. But they happen also to work, they happen to be politicians, they happen to be in decision making, etc. And it has to get into the main discourse when it comes to public policies to happen. So then we need also progressive men to be on our side. Because when you are in a very limited resource environment, you are going to prioritize, okay? You are going to look into services to save women, pregnant women. You are going to look into investing in girls' education, in making sure that running waters is closed and women don't have to make kilometers, etc. So we have such a broad array of women's needs that we have to be strategic. So that we have to also look into that. But what I think should happen is to make sure that the budget works for women. So it goes beyond the care issue. It's the strategic, needs and rights of women, and we have to make sure that gender budgeting is one of our key and main strategies. Let's, make sure that for every national budget, that would be the ideal. Every ministry will have a special line, to fund strategic action to elevate the status of women. And for that, you need to work with the Ministry of Finance, which is 9 out of 10, case or chances to happen to be a man. And if you look into the ministries, I think the majority are men. So that's good also to get them on board. I think that strategic move can make a huge, huge difference. But we know after that what you need to do. You need to work with parliamentarians. You need to, build a coalition around that. Because, the first problem women have is the issue of money. in my part of the world, to begin with. And I have to salute here the work of NGOs, which has become more and more difficult because of the scarcity of public funding, and unfortunately, a big country like the United States, is becoming less and less, quote-to-quote generous in terms of supporting those activities. So more than ever, we have to be strategic, and we have to see how we can bundle, some of the strategies. I think that the issue of care could be tied to women education and also women, project-generated activities where you need to free the time of women, to handle those issues. So how are we going to do that? You may want to invest much more, as I said, in kindergartens, in places in the working, sort of places, making sure that you don't pay extra money for your children to be looked after because you want to work. Because the society is not going to say, okay, you're free from, from caring for your kids. No. So that's how we have to be strategic, I do think. Not an easy task, but at this point, this is what I can share with you.
Let me add a figure on one of your comments you made. If we are not wrong, in GWL we manage figures such as currently there are 23 ministers of finance, women in the world, and only 13% of the central bankers are women. Therefore, here we have already a ladder to climb to reach a balance in terms of leadership in these key areas that you were mentioning, how to budget. Let's move to another angle, and I'm going to ask now María. María, you have, as I mentioned before, already great experience as the leader in a diplomatic corps that has a feminist foreign policy and a feminist cooperation policy. From your experience, thank you. From your experience, what has been working? What transformations have you been able to promote under this strong banner that you successfully exercise?
Thank you, Cristina, and thank you, María Fernanda, Aminata, Touré, and Noemi, Madrid, Espinosa, all the panelists here, and especially to great shout out to GWL Voices, with whom we've been partnering for now already like 2 years or 1.5 years already in their endeavors to bring forward a rotation for equality in the presidency of the General Assembly, and also the next Secretary General be a woman, Secretary General of the United Nations. So thank you to you all, and as per your question, I'm going to go back a little bit in time to 2021 when Spain decided to have a feminist foreign policy. And back then we had already been, of course, mainstreaming gender equality in most of our actions. But then, you know, taking this a step forward, and then probably the influence of Sweden was a decisive moment, because we needed to conceptualize, or we needed to have a guide, to have a framework for our feminist foreign policy, and of course to know what we were dealing with, what we wanted to do with that, and what it meant. So not only mainstreaming gender equality, but also mainstreaming gender equality from a transformative point of view into all our foreign policy. So then going back to having a feminist cooperation, which is something that we are here for today, that has also been incorporated. So this perspective of feminism has also been incorporated to our cooperation for development and to the Agency for Cooperation. In that way, right now we have also a feminist international cooperation for development. What means that, so this vision is mainstreamed across our foreign policy agendas, as I have just said, and it's cross-cutting priority, indeed, in the multilateral positions, and humanitarian assistance, peace and security efforts, and so what we are doing up there basically is being strong advocates for our partners and for the advancement of SDG 5 in all these complexities. And having a cooperation which is feminist means basically that, for instance, and in numbers, we are right now, as of 2025, number 12 in total official development aid as per the OECD ranking, and we have increased our contribution to official development aid to 14%. That is $3.6 billion. But when we come to success stories about how this reflects in our feminist foreign policy, because indeed what we're talking here is about, you know, walk the talk, and therefore if you have this policy has to go beyond words, it's got to go into action, and action comes through money, and properly and adequately funding everything that has to do with feminist in its foreign policy. So cooperation is the way, the path to really make an impact up there. And we have increased by three times, okay, the contributions to UN Women, taking into consideration the recent expressions of cuts in international cooperation coming from some member states and some main donors. This is already like a big, for us, it's some statement. It's a big statement of commitment with cooperation. So six-fold contribution to United Nations, to UN Women. And then six-fold to UNFPA. So, meaning that we are here pushing forward and advancing sexual and reproductive health rights for women and girls around the world. In totally, and like globally, what we are doing, so that you have like the broader picture, not just the breakdown picture, that is 10% of our our ODA is dedicated to women, specifically to women. So either as a main priority or is mainstreamed. But indeed, what we are willing to do is to mainstream the gender perspective in all our programs, so that all the cooperation has a gender perspective in the future. What we think that we do with this, is a systemic change that we are promoting. Because we believe that, of course, when we invest in women and girls, we invest in the future, and we invest, obviously, in the greater investors that we have in our society, that's women and girls. Thank you, Christina. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I was saying, we have to do budgeting, gender budgeting. In a way, you do the same with your policy. You are mainstreaming everything which is gender in your policies. Thank you very much. Let's move on to another. Now we go to another region, Noemi. Noemi, tell us about your region. Very specific and extremely vulnerable. Beautiful places, but extremely vulnerable. I think it's worth underlying it. The Caribbean region is weak because climate change is affecting you so much and is affecting women a lot. You are Secretary General of the Association of Caribbean States. Tell us, how do you have and do you implement a gender approach to the activities of your organization? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me, first of all, to be a part of this panel. I feel very honored to be in such great company, and thank you to Global Women Leaders for always promoting initiatives that bring the importance of women's leaderships to global discussions, and a warm greeting to my fellow panelists and to you as moderator. I'm honored to be here representing the Association of Caribbean States, which was founded 30 years ago, and it's an association that comprises all of the countries of the Greater Caribbean. So it's 35 countries and territories of the Greater Caribbean, everybody that has a coast on the Caribbean Sea. And we are brought together with the purpose of promoting consultation, cooperation, and concerted action among the states, countries, and territories of the Caribbean. So to answer your question, I'm going to have 3 points. And the first one, which is very important, is that the Greater Caribbean is unique because we are a zone of peace, which is a fact that is of paramount importance in today's geopolitical landscape. We are united first and foremost by our Caribbean Sea, but also by deep historical, social, and cultural ties. And allow me to emphasize the cultural wealth and the challenges faced by, as you rightly pointed, this highly vulnerable region, which, even though we bear the brunt of multiple overlapping crises, the Greater Caribbean is a region rich in cultural and biological diversity, creativity, and ancestral knowledge. It holds significant geostrategic potential as a point of connection between continents, between peoples, and between economic interests. It is a region that has demonstrated resilience, innovation, and the ability to develop homegrown solutions across both the islands and the continental territories. The second point I would like to make is that Latin America and the Caribbean is the only region with a regional gender agenda, thanks to the Regional Conference on Women in Latin America and the Caribbean led by ECLAC. This is one of the most advanced intergovernmental processes in the world in terms of gender equality. Through this mechanism, initiatives such as the creation of the Regional Fund to support women and feminist organizations and movements have been promoted. This initiative funds, finances actions from and for women. This experience is a powerful example of how political leadership in close consultation with civil society can create mechanisms for feminist financing. In this context, one of the most relevant issues for current financial architectural reform, which was already raised in this panel and addressed by Aminata Touré, is the recognition of care work. And I want to emphasize that the same regional conference in Latin America and the Caribbean is the construction of comprehensive care systems, which has also been promoted as a key strategy for sustainable and gender equal recovery. These systems seek to recognize, reduce, and redistribute unpaid care work, and various financial models have been identified, including general revenues, public and private insurance, and mixed funds adapted to each country's realities. At the same time, there's a strong push to consolidate the concept of a care society, which is a paradigm shift that places care at the center of social organizations, acknowledging the interdependence among people and the need to fairly distribute care responsibilities. And I in progress in the examples I outlined before, it is not yet sufficient to meaningfully integrate women into financial systems. And here I will again emphasize the cultural and structural transformations that are urgently needed. First, we need to empower girls from an early age to ensure that they know that they not only have the right, but also the ability to participate in decision-making spaces, including those related to money. And second, by promoting women's leadership in financial institutions. Women must lead development banks and be at the forefront of deciding how, for what, and under what conditions resources for development are allocated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, María. You bring to us an aspect which is extremely important, which is for a group of countries, for a region, to have a coherent approach, and how much this cooperation helps to advance, in particularly when the units are the small countries or not so big countries, let's say it this way. Now to you, let's move to María Fernanda, and it links very much, very well what you said in terms of representation. María Fernanda is hopefully, and I'm sure she will, address us on how the question of representation is critical. Representation moving mountains of difficulties. If we continue at the same pace as we are now, it will take more than a century to reach equality. And starting from the top is fundamental. So, María Fernanda, what do you think is necessary, and what can we do to remove the roadblocks to achieving gender parity in international financial institutions?
Well, thank you, Cristina. And if you allow me a little bit of a digression here to acknowledge a person that is here in the audience, and that is Ambassador Arlene Tickner, sitting at the back, hiding somewhere, but she's also the ambassador for feminist foreign policy of Colombia, and I'm very proud that, yeah, she's hiding there. And I really wanted to say hi and thank you for being here, Arlene, and you're also, force of the universe when it comes to gender equality and really bringing feminist foreign policy to the ground, so it matters for women. So thank you for being with us. And I'm going to be a little indisciplined because I heard the question and I have to respond to the question.
Yes.
But then, I cannot stop making comments about what we already heard. And, the force and the power to look at what gender sensitive affirmative action means in terms of policy in a specific country setting. And that's what we heard from Ambassador Alonso. We look at regions and we look at the Great Caribbean of these 20 plus states really committing to changing the way we do economics, the way we take decisions, the way we plan to put women at the center. And here we have Aminata Touré saying, you know, this makes economic sense. And we have to change cultural mindsets. So we value the most precious asset for women. Which is the most precious asset for women? Time. Time. It is about time and how we allocate time. And yes, we are multitasking, and that's in our DNA. But when you bring the care economy responsibilities as part of the macroeconomic accounting, it makes a big difference. A big difference. When you professionalize, defeminize, and account for care work, it makes a big difference. And why is it so important when we're thinking about, transforming the international financial architecture from a women's rights and a girls' rights lens? It's not a minor issue, and that's why we need more women empowered, deciding how to factor in all these elements and to make these policy decisions and pass the regulation that that we need to pass. And the question to me was basically what is that we found in our GWL Voices flagship report on women in multilateralism, and I think Christina shared the numbers, which are extremely disappointing, to say the least, but unsurprising, in a way. Most international financial institutions have never had a woman at the helm, and that's a reality. The World Bank, for example, the Bank of the Banks, the multilateral, big bank, has never had a female president. 23 countries, I think Christina mentioned that at the beginning, have female finance ministers out of 193, 60% of women leading central banks. And but I have to say this number of 16% is the highest ever in record. So it looks like we're going a little bit better, but do not be misled by that. We track the role of women in power in multilateral organizations, and our impulse and our wish would be to see steady increase, incremental, little bit more. It doesn't happen that way, unfortunately. We go into a little bit more and then a little bit less, and we go backwards again. So you mentioned what are the roadblocks, and there, I think there are many roadblocks. First of all is stereotypes and cultural hurdles to understand that we can perform any role, any responsibility in public office, at the local level, at the national level, at the international level. This seems like a platitude because we all know that, but when decisions have to be made, this comes to play big time. And I think that Aminata mentioned a little bit of that. Having been, the first Minister of Defense of my country, I can tell you, what stereotypes and prejudice is so entrenched, culturally entrenched. So I would say, and this is perhaps the first obstacle. The other obstacle is something that Noemi mentioned, which is the issue of regulation and affirmative action policies. And when I was growing up as a dreamer, I continue to be a dreamer, by the way, but I said, quota systems, special laws for women, no need. We are so powerful, so talented. Merit base is going to place us at the center. It does not work. So I changed my mind very quickly, and yes, we need affirmative action regulation, affirmative action policies and laws. And why is that we want more women in the financial space? It's not because it is demographic justice only, we're more than half of the world's population. It is not only about that. It is about quality. It's about what we're capable to deliver. And there is an incredible amount of evidence. What is that women do when they're, allowed, provided the fair space and the fair power? And we have seen, and it's documented, and I have many numbers here, but number one, and it's proven, better returns on poverty alleviation efforts when you have, women in charge of allocating budgets, gendered budgets, you mentioned. Second, more effective climate resilience responses in the new forms of societies we live in. It's to invest, for example, in the care economy. And the care economy is not charity. It is basic social infrastructure. And we see, all these transformations that we are asking for happening under the leadership of women. And this is not an essentialist approach. This is proven, evidence-based. We know, because we have shortage of this precious asset, which is called time. And we know how our lives would be much better if care is professionalized, defeminized, and properly paid and remunerated. It makes sense also from a macroeconomic perspective. The numbers, you know the numbers, it's $10.3 billion in GDP per year. And going back to the obstacles, I would. Just cut me, Christina, with all the, but roadblocks and, regulation number one, cultural norms and prejudice, and also institutional cultures, I would say. It's not only the society, the culture, but what happens in the workplace, non-flexible workplace policies, in the work environments, in hiring practices, and these ever-present pay gaps. We continue to have a 20% average gap on salaries and income for women. So all of that really hampers an economy that works for women and girls. And when we scale up, and I will close with that, you say what to do and why are we here for, and what is the connection between financing for development and building an economy that works for women. And I have here, a little bit of bad news, because you say, okay, just quantify and value care work, and then we will be okay. Unfortunately, not enough. We need to think on the big structural shifts that need to take place when we're dealing about debt restructuring, for example, when we are dealing with a new tax pact that has to go beyond the national, it has to go regional and global. We're very supportive of this new convention, tax convention under the auspices of the UN, but it cannot be a convention, a tax convention that is gender blind. It has to be, there has to be affirmative action and investment for women. In all of these, the governance in multilateral banks has to change. In all of these, in the rules of the game and the mechanisms, women have to be at the table where decisions are made on multilateral financing in terms of the access, the quality of the investment, the conditions and the mechanisms, the assessment on risk, the connection and the nexus between macroeconomics, climate vulnerability and investment. I think women are also at the center. And all of these has to happen at the same time. So we should embrace complexity, profound and integral
reform of the international financial architecture and change also transformation from the bottom down and the bottom up as well. So it's not an easy task. I think, and perhaps I'll be, I think that the outcome document, the Compromiso de Sevilla, in the current circumstances, provides very important tools for women, for women's movements, for governments to really pursue, the shaping of an international financial architecture that works and delivers for women. I would leave it there in solidarity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, María Fernanda. A very broad picture of what needs to be done, but I'm going now to make you choose in order to be concrete and in order to pin it down. You all explained your experiences, your successes, your ambitions, but if there were to choose amongst one thing that governments can do, implement, just as of tomorrow, to significantly speed the progress towards the equality goal, what would you do? Let's start with Aminata.
Unfortunately, if it could happen, I would cite one suggestion, but it never happened in real life. Never one solution would solve such complex issue, linked to patriarchy over 1,000 years. So that is going to be difficult. But I think we have to be very strategic as feminists, and I take also on board all the men that are here. We have made progress all the time. I speak from my context, but globally. Today was the exam for baccalaureate to go to universities after you finish high school in Senegal. Just got the statistic that 59% of the candidates are young women.
Wow.
When in my time, when I was going to high school, that number would be 20%. So it's in a lifetime that we sort of made a leap from, really. So you do have education right there that take you to one place to another world. And we have to invest in education, in girls' education, and start it right from the beginning, kindergarten, and making sure that they pass secondary school. They were also more numerous for the primary school exam to go to high school, more than boys, but they start dropping off sometime in secondary school where they become women and 16, 17, early marriage and all these issues. So we have to keep them in school the longest because we know that schooling is very protective for women, especially in high fertility environment like Africa. West Africa is still the highest fertility rate that we witness these days. So school is also a very good contraceptive, I would say. So we have to invest on that one. That's one. Second, I do believe in the power of law. I used to be a minister of justice, and whatever you secure in the constitution, in the laws, it's a stepping point. It doesn't solve the issue because you have to do numerous things afterward. But we have to secure, women's rights and girls' rights legally. It's very important. Saying as a law that women need to access national resources and citing them is very powerful. Then you can, take the state to the Supreme Court for violating the Constitution, for instance. You can litigate. So it's very important to have this leverage of the law. I talk about the third pillar, which is the budget. Let's imagine ourselves not having money. What would we do? And you realize that when you lose your credit card and due to a pocket thief, and then you feel so disempowered at the minute. Well, you solve it later on. So imagine on a permanent basis when you have to find out what your next meal is going to be. So I think money money is fundamental in elevating, the status of women. So it has to be secured in the budget. You have to have reforms that, oblige every single ministry to, set aside budget. While some people are saying it's no longer gender mainstreaming, but we learn from gender mainstreaming. Gender mainstreaming means, paying lip service most of the time. So then let's try to do both. Okay, we mentioned gender, but we want to see the money. So that has to happen. That's the third. Fourth one is really societal change. So we have to bring on board all the change actors, including the media, men support groups, very important, religious leaders, very progressive religious leaders. I can give you an example. When we wanted to erase female genital mutilation in Egypt is a very sophisticated country. At some point it was up to 80%. They call it the pharaonic circumcision. In Sudan, it's almost universal, etc. But we make huge progress. We want to discuss with religious leaders who said it's not in the Quran. Why are you practicing it? It comes from ages, etc. So they've been agent of change. We had some imam who supported female candidates, saying that be like Khadija, who was a trader, who was etc. That brings also about change. And we also have to make sure that we build coalitions. I think it's very important. That's the 5 pillars I would see after the making sure that we do have a program for behavior, and cultural behavior change. Then let's build coalitions between young people and women. For me, it's a strategic move because it's 80% of the electorate. Nobody can resist that movement. And we happen to be both groups marginalized, in most countries. But we still are running parallel track. And then in countries like Senegal, we can build upon, you have to support your mothers. When we're outside, protesting, you're gonna let us alone in the street. So no, every young boy would join. So I do think that strategic link is important. We both have interest in changing either the mindset or practice, governmental practice, etc. So that is, I would say, the 5 pointers I would share with you.
Very important pointers, but let's continue pointing what ought to be done, what we ought to give a preeminence. Anna.
No, this is kind of funny because when you sent me the question, I had a different answer. And now, these days have changed my mind. I think if you ask me for one thing only, that governments or we all could do to speed up our progress towards gender equality, I say one thing, which is parity, political representation, and presence and meaningful presence of women in decision-making spaces. I think that definitely what has been advancing our agenda, the feminist agenda, the agenda of women and girls these years throughout the 20th century was the access to representation. Because then, from within, we could change the laws. So, if you think of it, it's not only that we need finance, we need power, and we need political power. We need to have our voice heard. If we don't have that, we don't have agency at all. We need to vote, and we need to be voted for. So, representation. And that can be only achieved with affirmative action. Thank you for lending me this word, María Fernanda, because sometimes I like the lingo, and this is very useful. So it means that affirmative action is legislation, measures, so regulation, and that is something that we have done so far in Spain with legislating parity that is equal 50-50 presence, representation of women and men in the political arena. And that's the only way by which we women will be able to change our realities. Because if you have women's perspectives, gender perspective, in everything that is being done and decided at political level, then you can really have an impact. So we go to the roadblocks. What happens? We want this, we can have this, but then we have the roadblocks. And those are the patriarchy and its regulations. So we didn't even know where to start to deconstruct the reality so that it works for women. And then that's, again, going back to affirmative action. We demand, and we have to get what we demand for, but we have to start by being there, being present. So, how can we support women to be in the political arena, to be able to dedicate their asset of time, very limited? How can we help women? So, first, eradicate violence. That's one thing that happens. We have a lot of violence in politics nowadays, and not only in the Western countries or the global north, but I think that this violence is across the globe, everywhere. So, first of all, women are not coming to politics because we feel that we are pushed out of this game. It is not made for us. We are not going to sacrifice our valued time, our family, only to come to fight for our lives. Sorry. So let's eradicate political violence out of this equation. So, and then, of course, you asked for just one thing, and one thing only. Women, we have been working in very precarious conditions. This morning, I was having a conversation with a member of the civil society who, I don't know if she's still here, who said, we have less money, less funding, we will do more with less. And I said, not again. Oh, Shanasio over there, we had this conversation this morning. What was my reaction? Not again. Again, women, more with less. That's our history, indeed. So, yes, we have to elevate women financially. We have to empower them. And we need money, we need resources. And that's where, we all coincide too. Because then, if you give money to women, we know the results. I mean, we were not born yesterday. Already in the 70s, Mohammed Yunus came with this idea about microcredits for women. So we have not to trust them. I mean, this is already done. We already trust women with credit and loans. What we have to do is to have a system in place that works with them without us needing to go there over and over again to insist. No, we have to, the banking system has to have measures in place to be able to, trust women and give loans to women because we repay, because we invest in productivity, in society, in things that really matter to advance the common good. What an amazing word, the common good. How often and for how many years we have not been talking about the common good. And that's something that even nowadays can be revolutionary to think about. But yes, that's what we're here for. women. First representation, and we also need the economic support, and then everything will work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Where would you focus? Where would you focus in an efficient manner? Thank you.
I do have one thing, but I can't help but say that I fully agree with everything that everybody has
So
said.
we'll add to the list.
Yes. And just very quickly, the issue of women handling money, I think is really one thing, but it's already, the point has already been made, so I won't make it again. But even the leadership, the need for women in leadership positions is because when women are not in leadership positions of multilateral banks, for example, there's violence against women from those men that manage that money. But that's a story for another time. My one thing is that I do think that in this multilateral crisis that we face, a crisis of multilateralism that requires much reform of the multilateral systems that we do have, there are opportunities, and this is going to sound a little self-serving, but I do believe this, in regional organizations like the Association of Caribbean States. And I would say that we are indispensable hubs for 3 reasons. And the one is that we have an agenda of trade, connectivity, and protecting the environment, which has a broad consensus. The second one is that we were created by the South for the South. And even though, for example, the ACS doesn't have a feminist perspective yet, the current leadership definitely has the commitment to make sure that it becomes a feminist organization. And then the third reason why regional organizations are fundamental is, for example, again, the ACS, which I'm very proud to head. Half of our mandate is to implement projects. So half of our mandate is to translate our political commitments into concrete projects that benefit the people of the Greater Caribbean. So that's my one thing, although I fully agree with everybody else. And I will add one little final thing, is that I think that the role of women at all levels, and I have been very inspired by women fishers, for example, in the Greater Caribbean, who have, from empirical knowledge, know how to protect the ocean. And so we need to harness women from girls to women fishers to at every level, to the highest level of leadership. Thank you.
Very complimentary. María Fernanda will give the floor to you.
Wow. Well, the problem is that I'm left without anything else to add, but perhaps some keywords. I already spoke a lot at the beginning, and basically we really want to have a conversation and interact with the audience here, but few keywords. It is about money, it is about power, and it is about governance. And I would say that all of this all these systems have to deliver and work for women. No? When I say money, I speak about the entire financial architecture at multi-level, from the community to the city, to the nation, to the multilateral space. And we have to be at the table when we have to decide on allocation of resources, or where it goes, or where the priorities are. And when I say this, I see Greg Monroe sitting, is among the very few men sitting here, but it's not by accident. He leads the Cities Alliance, the organization I'm very proud to be the president of. And believe me, I accepted to be the president because it is an organization that works with women-led cities and urban poverty and slums. And the experience that I have learned from the Cities Alliance family is that it is about women, building resilience, being economists, being strategists, but in situations of extreme scarcity and in extreme situations of violence sometimes. So it is about money, it is about power and representation. I have to say that Anna really took away our own GWL Voices value proposition in our job description as an organization. That's what I was going to talk about, but I'm very happy that we agree that it is about power, it is about money, investment, and resources, and it is about the right governance. And we say governance, we do not only speak about the big multilateral institutions and banks, we also speak about the regional. And what Noemi has shared with us is really telling. And I think we need to more add the innovation that is happening at the regional level in Africa, in Asia, the role of regional banks, the role of regional integration institutions. And it is about the local. And go and check the incredible work that women are doing in informal settings and in slums around the world. So this is,
So we have
really moving. So that would be it.
Quite a solid list of to-dos, to-dos. And now is your turn. We'd like very much to hear your comments, your questions. We have a microphone. Megan is going to move around. I'm going to give the floor to a man first, and you can introduce yourself to a lady in the back, but there is a lady in the front row to whom I also want to give the floor. It will be number 3, because she's a distinguished member of GWL Voices. So Jan, we are going to hear you as well. So we start with the men. Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fernanda, for this very good discussion and topic. My name is Gilbert Sendugwa. I work with the Africa Freedom of Information Center, which is a network of CSOs, 56 years old working across Africa. And one of the key suggestions is around budget, and I like that. But there is a very important topic which I think constitutes low-hanging fruits that is quite ignored. We did a study in Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, and Tanzania on the barriers to women's participation in public procurement. And the reason is that in these countries, every year government spends over 60% of the national budget through public procurement. But women-owned businesses take less than 1%. Less than 1%. So without addressing this imbalance, there is no way we can achieve equality targets. So it is very critical that women have a fair share of public or government contracts a year. Now, following this research, we advocated that these 5 governments should reform their laws to reserve contracts for women. Already Kenya and Tanzania had these policies where they were reserving contracts for women-owned businesses, but implementation was challenged, especially in Tanzania, where since 2016 no women-owned business had got a contract under this new scheme. Uganda amended the law, Rwanda and Ethiopia also amended the law to reserve contracts for women. But up till now, there is no business that has one contract under these new policies. What I think, and let me say in Uganda, the new law says that 15% of every procurement budget of a ministry, department or agency should be reserved for women, youth, and persons with disabilities. A contract which is below 30 million shillings should go to women, youth, or persons with disabilities. That's about, I think, about $8,000. And then for district local governments, a contract below 10 million shillings. That is about $3,000. So you can see in terms of policy now, the law allows or compels entities to create opportunities for women. But in terms of implementation, awareness, compelling ministries and agencies to do what the law says they need to do, building capacities of women to be able to prepare bids and do these contracts, there is a huge investment gap that is needed. So I think if this is done, it can influence many other governments across the world to follow suit, and I think it can change the economic situation of women around the world in a reasonably short time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very interesting comment, public procurement. We'll hold a second to the answer. We'll take the three first questions. There is a lady in the back. Yes, first the lady, and then young people. And then we'll go to the panel for comments.
Good afternoon to you all. My name is Chisache. I come from Economic and Trade Corporation of African Union. And just be brief. Time is money and money is time. But how do you help a woman whose money and time are controlled by men?
Can you repeat the last part? I don't know if everybody has heard it.
Time and money are both important to women. But how do you help to finance for a woman whose money and time are controlled by a man?
Can I ask Megan to bring the microphone to Jan? Jan is a distinguished member of GWL, long-time career UN, very senior UN official.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm here now in my capacity as the Director General of the International Development Law Organization, and you can imagine that the message that I'm talking about at this conference is about the power of law, so thank you very much, Mr. Touré. And clearly, if you're going to have an enabling environment for change, you've got to have clear laws that protect people and that are enabling the majority of populations to access what we're all talking about here. But listening to the panel, three things came out to me. The first one is really that our experience working in over 100 countries has really shown that laws, institutions, policies, and budgets are all interconnected, and you cannot deal with one without the other. You've got to deal with them all, but following the money is really important. Clearly, we don't have a lot of data. That's my second point. We really need to have more data. We need to bring it out. Our organization, together with the World Bank, UNDP, UN Women, and others, has done a study recently on financing justice for women, and there we have seen the very low percentages in both national budgets and in international ODA that goes to justice. And we just did a quite interesting study on violence against women, looking at the allocations in national budgets. There's no global database on this, for example, so we had to look at those few countries that have some. We found actually that the highest percentage of allocation for violence against women in the justice sector was 0.02%, but it was in Spain, so that is a good news. But clearly it's very low everywhere, but there actually isn't much data, and without data, everything is in the dark. So I think that what is happening now to bring this out into the open is really important. The last point that for us has proven extremely important, and all of you have talked about it, is leadership. And we see in the justice sector what Mr. Touré was saying, that there are more young women coming into the sector, but very few getting to the top. Very few chief justices, very few managing partners of law firms, but even in other parts of the justice chain, very few women inspectors of police, for example. So there's many areas that we need to invest, and having women in those decision-making positions is really important. Last thing I wanted to say is that looking back to the third conference of financing for development in 2015 in Addis, you remember that there was a commitment there. I was just looking at it, was that countries will put in place systems to track and make public allocations for gender equality and women's empowerment.
Limited, so that we are carrying on. That's why we're talking of the life cycle inequalities that we need to break, starting very early, when you have preference for daughters rather than sons, and in some part of the world, actually, women still abort when they have a female fetus, and we do have a gap between. We do know that it's very existing in some places. So then we have to address the root of the problem. That's the thing, because if we don't, we carry on, and that's exactly, Madam, what you said. All the way from the bottom to the top, the inequalities repeat themselves. So that's also a thing. We do have to also go through economic literacy of women, too many women with promising projects just remain small. So that's, we need to stay small, remain small. That's the critique I've been doing to microfinance, which is good. But I say, I mean, you have to grow. I mean, you know, you don't have to just stay with your $200 loan. I mean, so how do we do that? How do we elevate, you know, a large class of women entrepreneurs to the level where they can go through public procurement? So that is the question that would solve your suggestion. And of course, you have to go through social, cultural change. And she's very right to say if patriarchy is dominant, I agree. Time is controlled. You do have intellectual women who go to divorce because their husband say, "Why are you coming back late?" I don't think it's specific to Africa, by the way. Yeah.
No.
And you have the mother-in-law who believe that, I mean, her daughter-in-law is here to serve, you know, her excellent son, and then these are norms. If you don't change that, well, it takes different forms, huh? Yeah. You know, from you know, when you are a general manager, are a female, then you know, I mean, everybody's like, yeah, but why is it her and not the husband? You know, if it is not openly said, its manifestation comes in different ways. You know? So all of that are what? Patriarchal, you know, norms that we live under and that needs to be challenged, but we have to challenge it at an early age. And we have responsibilities as women and mothers. The way we educate, you know, our sons. I remember one of my cousin was very close to his mother, very close. He would follow, you know, her everywhere, including in the kitchen. And the mother told him, well, you know, he was maybe, you know, 6 or 7. If you keep following me to the kitchen, you're gonna grow bread. I mean, of course, the guy ran away from the kitchen. And so, no surprise if later on, as a married man, he would not like going in the kitchen. So, this just to say that we're, you know, sort of also fueling to those norms. And I totally agree that behavior and change and, you know, social norm change has to be the priority, which we tend not to do. It's part of our to-do list. But we leave it to the media, and it's becoming worse. Because if you're not thin and very pretty and light skin and long hair, well, you're not a woman. Yeah. And we have a huge bunch of young women who believe that. And so you have different forms of oppression that change over time. But what do we do to counter, you know, all these messages that weaken actually at the end the status of women? So what do we do? So that is also important that we look into it.
More comments on the 3 questions? Maybe María Fernanda, or we give the floor to the audience?
No, floor to the audience. But to ask you a question, you know, the person at the back, you said, you know, power and money, and who holds the power and who is in charge of the money. And again, I think the answer is very short. It is about power. And that's why we are reclaiming power. And that's why we want to be in positions of power and struggle to have the power to change societies and to change economies.
Any other comment, Anna? Yes?
Yes, I was shocked by the statement of women's time being controlled by men. This statement carries behind the idea of violence. I mean, obviously, it does not happen everywhere that women's time is controlled by men. It is maybe co-opted by men's needs, but control carries the idea of violence behind these controls. So, and this is one of the things that I find that it's really, you know, upsetting from to me. Of course, our time is limited because we carry the burden of care, providing care. That's one thing. But when man controls your life and your time, that's got a name. and that is gender-based violence. So as for leadership and women reaching, accessing the university, colleges, and being graduates, and being able to work in many different spheres, but then again, finding that they can't climb up that ladder and reach leadership positions. I think that we have to go back to, again, the structures, the cultural structures, the roadblocks, and again, coming back to care and the time that we have to dedicate to other things beyond our own professional careers. Yeah, I say I want it all. Yes, I also want it all. I've seen my men colleagues and other, my peers, but also my fathers and grandparents, grandfathers, who have had it all, a career and a family and everything. They didn't have to sacrifice one single thing to advance. And I want the same. And I think that we all want the same. So care is important.
Noemi, you want to say something before we go to the audience? Yes. Hands up for the next round of questions. Yes, the lady here in the front, and then a gentleman in the back, and another lady in the middle. This side, and then another one here. Yeah. Yeah, and at 4 we close. Thank you. Sure.
Hello. Thank you so much for sharing today. It's been really interesting. I'm Sydney from the International Institute for Environment and Development. I mainly work on climate finance, specifically climate adaptation finance, and I see it's quite separate, talking about gender and climate finance quite a lot of the time. So I'm coming to all of the feminist and gender events and seeing what people are saying specifically in relation to finance. And I'm thinking specifically about something that's growing, a movement about country platforms, which is a way of financing climate finance to different countries and ideally coordinating across the board, so it looks at climate in relation to health, gender, water, etc. But also, this is a new governance model for how climate finance will be funded, and they're saying that if it doesn't change who's at the table, then it's not delivering what it's meant to be delivering. So I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on how we can create more synergies between gender and other sort of sectors, specifically in government, of how we can integrate gender into, I guess, specifically climate adaptation.
We do it in formal settlements, and I'm talking at a much higher level.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think some of our heads of state, when they're setting up their cabinets, they're very quick to give women positions of social welfare or Ministry of Women. And I actually looked it up while we were talking, that only 11% of ministers of finance and heads of central banks are women. Only 11%. And yes, I'm also proud to say that I come from a country that we are on our 4th woman as Minister of Defence. We've had 4 women in a row. But we've never had a Minister of Finance. In fact, I've also counted up, we've had 26 Ministers of Finance, and they've all been men. The most successful of the 26 had something that the other 25 did not have. He had a woman who was the Director General. And he was considered the most successful. So I think we just need to be careful of the window dressing, and I think we need to perhaps call it out. But something more important is coming out at the end of December 2026, and that is the replacement of the Secretary General. Mm-hmm. And I fear, considering that we are placed within, my organisation is placed within the multilateral system, that we then have another man as the Secretary General, because it will look like the UN is also window dressing and playing lip service and not doing something meaningful. And I look around the world and say, how can we advocate for this? Now, I come to GWL as being perhaps the one grouping that can push that voice. But I'd like to hear if there are other ways besides GWL, because it will be a big step for us if we have a woman Secretary General at the end of 26.
There is a question in the back. Can you see yes, the lady? Yes, the lady. Yes. And then here in the front, and then here. I think there is here. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to come back to the question of finance, which is in the title of both this event and the conference. And make this point in another side event. I haven't heard it enough in the high-level panels. The gender imbalance in this conference itself is absolutely unacceptable. And I don't think that it would have been as normal a year ago. We know that there's an imbalance in the finance sector in terms of women occupying decision-making roles, but the crisis that we're undergoing, financial, political, and whatnot, seems to almost legitimize this situation. And I've been surprised that no heads of state, no ministers have actually pointed out in the panels the situation. I wonder if this would be the same a year ago. I think the conversation around finance and scarcity of finance and debt always tends to crowd out issues such as gender. And in the current context of polarization and shifts backwards, I think the situation is almost more dire in the sense that gender seems to be that issue that's being set aside, in the name of climate finance and others, debt relief and whatnot. So the question is how we reinsert gender and women's and girls' rights and intersectional rights, I would say, into the conversation. And so I think, I like the question about climate finance. I think that the whole conversation about care, and that's how the panel started, is a way to go about doing that. Not just care economies, care society like CEPAL is currently posing, or care as an ethos that orients our way of being in and with the world in a context of profound crisis and transformation. And I think care opens up cracks that you can kind of insert a lot of different things into, including climate. But I just wonder if we should be talking about that instead of, when I talk about care, I'm talking about climate, I'm talking about providing dignity and equality for people. So maybe it's, instead of climate finance, it's care finance that we need to talk about. Because that kind of integrally brings everything together.
Thank you. We'll go to the front. I think it's nice to hear your voices, dear members of the panel. Best time for you, more for them. Yeah. Yes. And we have another question here. Yeah.
Thank you so much. My name is Agustina Ariana and I'm coordinator for outreach and development at the Touré Madrid. We're actually a supporting organization, so I'm cheating a bit. But I'm sure that all of us here in this room agree with everything that is being said. But I can't avoid thinking about the daunting context that we're living in, the polarization and the backtracking. From abortion legalization in the US, the backtracking ODA on gender policy in the UK, even in Spain, the numbers of young boys who consider themselves feminists. So we all agree, but what's happening and how can we deal with it? Even in Spain, the feminist policy, we can feel very proud, but if there's a change of government, what's going to happen? Are we doing something wrong? What can we do to solve this? Because we have the recommendations that we agree on, but the context is just getting worse. So I just wanted to highlight that, because it's great to talk about this, but I think we have to be very conscious of the context. And María Fernanda, you said it, sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. But that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the last sentence from each of you.
Hello, and thank you very much for this very inspiring panel. We all agree with what it was said. My name is Beatriz Avellán. I'm a policy analyst in international affairs at the Foundation for European Professional Studies. And I just wanted to add up about the context of increasing militarization. We have seen how this year, 2024, saw the biggest increase in military spending. We are seeing now, there was the NATO summit last week discussing the 5%. Economies turning towards a war economy. We know how wars is triply intertwined with the patriarchy, with very militarized masculinities, and how it disproportionately affects women. So I wanted to talk about that, like we are talking about financing, but what about now this 5%, or how is that impacting women as well? So how can we bring kind of pushback against this militarization?
Thanks for bringing the topic. Ladies, members of the panel, you have half a minute to review. Anna, we start with this end. Thank you.
Yes, because I really feel a little bit appealed here. Agustina, coming from Agustina, for instance, and what would happen if there is a change of government, which is something that anyway in a democracy happens in a very natural way. Okay, so this is what eventually will happen. But you know what? I think that we have been seeding the seeds of sowing the seeds of the feminism in Spain for a long time. So even if you change the brand, if you change the label, you will still have the roots, the very strong roots and the foundations of what we have been doing, not for just since 2021, but in Spain we have working on this agenda for decades now. And the democracy that we have nowadays, Agustina, you know that it's solidified on feminism, on the work that women have been doing also. So this will not disappear overnight. As for our youngsters, and this is like a global trend, it is indeed problematic that the narratives coming from the anti-rights movement, anti-gender movement, and all these manosphere, etc., are having an impact on our youth, especially on Gen Zs who, maybe it's an influence that, I don't know, but it's extremely worrisome. The only thing that we can do is educate them. That's the only thing that I think that we all as a society can do nowadays. And then militarization. I think that this question, me myself, I cannot answer. I represent this government here as ambassador for feminist foreign policy. So I cannot answer for other countries who have decided to accept the increase of their GDPs to 5% dedicated to defense and security. As you know, our government has decided not to do so and to stick to the commitment of 2%. We understand that it's security what we are searching for, and that security also works through prevention. And as for what I do myself in my everyday work, it's to work on the women, peace and security agenda. You know, this year we will commemorate the 1325 anniversary, and this is investing in security. Investing in this agenda is investing in security prevention of conflict. So
thank
this
you,
is
Anna.
the work.
Thanks, super clear. Noemi.
Thank you. I'll be very quick. Just to answer the question on climate, which you addressed. Of course, women bear the brunt of climate catastrophes, but we also hold the solution. So one of the things that is tied to everything is that I always say that I want to make sure that the Greater Caribbean is not seen as periphery. The same thing for women. It's gazing to the other option, which is again, like the Greater Caribbean is not periphery. Women are not in the periphery, but need to be in the center. And the solution really is to have women in the center of decision making and at every level, and taking women's voices again from those that experience the climate catastrophes firsthand. I do have to say something about the militarization, because I mentioned it briefly, but the Greater Caribbean and Latin America and the Caribbean is a region of peace, and I think we need to really invest in areas like the Greater Caribbean, because we need to maintain that peace, and there's a great opportunity to bring those populations forward, those women forward, and it's something that we have to really protect, and it's a great opportunity. But I wouldn't, just like I don't take women in leadership and feminist voices for granted, I wouldn't take that for granted either.
Thank you. Thank you, Noemi. María Fernanda?
Well, quickly, we're running out of time, but here I was about to answer on the climate question, and basically I think here the secret is not to isolate climate finance. The nexus between development and climate investment has to be very, very tight. And if you look at the figures,
2% on adaptation, 4% on mitigation, earmarked for women and gender equality is really not enough. So we really need to be strong in saying investing more in development is investing more in climate and improve the balance sheet on that. And just a word on, there were comments about context. And I think that when we advocate, when we raise our voices, when we reclaim our power, when we ask for profound governance reforms in the line that our sister Jan Beagle was mentioning, I think anything cannot be context blind. We should absolutely be aware of what is happening in our geopolitical environments, in policy, investment, governance require in these current times more assertive collective action, renewed narratives, and convincing arguments, especially for the younger generations, when we look at what is happening in countries that are so far away on these issues, but then the younger generations are saying enough. Women are, have too much space, too much power, and winning of women is a losing of young men, and this is absurd. We know that it's not a zero-sum game, it's a win-win, but we need to make our case, unfortunately, once again, as we have done throughout history.
Aminata?
Thank you for this discussion that is occurring in a very worrisome environment. I think that women's rights in many places, and even in the global agenda, has never been threatened like these days. I mean, for decades. We have seen, from a finance point of view, defunding of organizations that, were championing women's rights. I do believe that the women's rights agenda is to be defended. We have to raise our voice. We have to, strengthen and enlarge our coalition. That's why I was talking of coalition of young people and women, because numbers matters. That's the only way to face politician who goes to election and so on. So I think we have also to be aware of the urgency of the situation for women. Otherwise, we're going to roll back so many advancements, and that's where we are now. The other subject of worries is what you just said, María Fernanda. I'm sure you also the studies showing that 40% of European young men believe that dictatorship is a good way of ruling the people. So this is extremely worrisome, and you can see that its translation into political movement that are gaining ground. And we do know that the first thing they do is to check out the advancement of the status of women. So what do we do as a community to defend ourselves? And I think that discourse has to be very clear. We know that there is a big absent in this conference. It's not, and we are to advance. I mean, we didn't get there. You're saying that it's going to take us 100 years to achieve gender equality in so many places. So now imagine if we are being dragged down. It's gonna. We're talking about millions, thousands of years. That is not acceptable, and we have to really get organized as international civil society, agent of change, progressive man. I think again that should be strategic for us. We have to bring into the fight, those who are like-minded, wherever they are, and make sure that we become stronger and stronger.
With these powerful words, we'll close because we are